Hey everybody, Edo here, and this is Thornwatch. The good folks at Lone Shark Games and Penny Arcade sent me a copy of the base game, Thornwatch, and the expansion, The Dark of the Wood. I've looked through the expansion, haven't even gotten to it. There's just so much stuff in Thornwatch, so consider this a commentary on Thornwatch, and I think it's safe to assume the expansion's just more on this, but I did not actually go through, and I have not played up that content. And so Thornwatch, I've got a lot of feelings here. So Thornwatch is a fantasy adventure game with one player playing as the judge, and there's the judge of stars and the judge below, but basically the dungeon master, and then it's a cooperative game for all the other players playing against them, the sage, blade, guard. And so how to put it all together. The game stands alone in its uniqueness. I think it is a interesting and compelling adventure and role-playing space and design that sort of feels very much its own and plays its own, and in that way it stands out. I think why can't I, what is that epic game that came out, #1 on BGG, I can't remember the name of, Gloomhaven. Gloomhaven had a similar vibe to it in that it didn't just feel like every other role-playing, it's not high fantasy, Tolkien traditional experience, right? It's a different world, a different vibe, and in that, stands out. So the other thing, and you'll have seen my unboxing, if you've seen my unboxing, you will know that overall, the quality is underneath what you'd expect in components from other games, modern games today. And considering the brand and IP, it's just sort of surprising. It's a ton of content, so, I mean, you can only imagine somebody wanted to just save a buck on the volume and scale. I don't know, but everything just underwhelms as far as, not the art, but the quality. I think some people are going to... The environment art, I think some people are going to have mixed feelings on because it's not in the sort of traditional Penny Arcade style or of the IP, but, you know, I think it could, you know, it's fine. But on the quality side, what I will say, and it's really important to say, you will notice it as you're unboxing it. You will feel it when you see the stuff on the inside. Like you're going to have this moment of like, really? However, playing doesn't matter at all. At no point, once you have it set up, once you have it put out, do you feel like the card or the game quality, the game experience suffers because of the quality of the components. It's not extra special like it could have been in certain places, but without a doubt, it's a ton of paper, and the paper does its job, and I think you can only ping the game, you know, hack at it so hard for under-delivering there, because in gameplay, when you're actually doing it, doesn't matter. You just forget about it. So I really wanted to mention that. But you will. You'll open the box and you'll be like, what? So getting to the game, they have this awesome branching narrative system, and it's really important to understand that the game that's experienced in the first module, A Bad Deal, isn't the wealth of it. When you play A Bad Deal, it feels flat and sort of like, I get the mechanics, I get the experience, but this game really seems to be meant to be played in sequence through a number of these stories. It has this really cool setup where there's like a setup for the Bad Deal, tells you what you need, and then you go into the box, you pull out everything out, you build a board out of all the land tiles, you put enemies in the appropriate players, you put the heroes in the appropriate place, and then you like set up the story in this little thing here, and then there's like the premise, and then after there's the result. And if something good happens, you get a choice as players. If something bad happens, you go to a different module, and then you proceed through this web of modules. And the layout of the board's different. The enemies are different. The narrative flows and takes you on an adventure. That part of it is rock solid, super interesting, but you gotta commit. If you play A Bad Deal and walk away, you're gonna feel like, meh, I get it, but this was a lot to just get that. It's in the narrative flow, it's in the fiction, it's letting yourself dive deeper and deeper and like weave and move around that the game shines. Almost to the point where I wonder if a bad deal might have been too straightforward for the type of, play a game and then not really play it again experience a lot of board gamers do these days. But that's for another day or another conversation. So, from a gameplay perspective, one player is playing as the judge, basically managing the bad guys, and then the other players are these cooperative heroes. Each one has their own deck, and you'll have your hero card just for reference. But then you're going to have ability cards and sort of resource cards, and you are going to be essentially picking your abilities. And on your turn, you'll move your character. You'll be on the board. You go to a square. You can fight an enemy or meet up with your friends or do whatever. There's environment effects on the board. But then you can use existing abilities or set up abilities along the bottom. You put them out as you like cleave or that's not the wrong character, but whatever. Cleave, and these will let you have big attacks or abilities with friends. And to charge them, you have to take either those colorful resource cards or other abilities and flip them over to build up the required number of paws in this case. So I need 3 of those. So I could have 1 of that and 2 of these. So once it's all charged up, you can use it. You're going to only have 5 cards per round, so it might take a little longer. So you're gonna, you're looking basically to have that. Like that's the 3 paws. I can use my cleave. Then when I use it, that's it. So there's a little bit of hand management, deck management, but it's really using your abilities with the other players, dealing with the unique challenges of the different types of creatures in the realm. Each room area, each game has a different victory condition and setup and all this good stuff. And then there's also random event cards that get put out. So like both interesting space every time you play and then nice variability through it. When you get hurt, you're working through a wound deck, which gives you a bunch of wounds. When it runs out, you lose, but it also means that and there's other win conditions for the judge, but also get stuck in your deck, so you lose cards. Your deck's no longer as effective because you've got these blank cards in it when you draw. Pretty standard deck builder type of thing. And I thought about putting it all out, but it was just this massive thing, and I didn't. The other piece of it is there's the momentum track, which has the root on one side and the edge, and these player cards get played out with you and the monsters, and that's basically turn order, and you can manipulate that track, and you're trying to get the monsters to fall off the edge and who goes first. It's a really nice initiative track that's interesting, great addition, core mechanic, works really well. So it's the momentum track with essentially, your deck and ability usage, which all works pretty standard, pretty straightforward. The other thing is each character has these, what are they called? The traits. And they can be angry, bloodthirsty, cautious. There's some fun text. So like cocky is, if there were 2 of me, you thought this would already be over. Daring, what you did would leave a table behind, a table of warnings for others. So like a bunch of text. And the idea here is when you use an ability, if you explain that ability in the way of the text, you could flip it over and get a free bonus roll for later. So it's this like injection of fiction. And so, okay, here's a quibble. If you take this as a fantasy game in an interesting environment with these really cool characters and story and narrative, and you let the Penny Arcade folks and the Loan Shark Game Stores take you on a ride, I think it is a interesting and unique feeling adventure game that will have you sort of going through this narrative space and doing cool things, and it works. The mechanics are solid. The momentum track works. I think the judge could be better. Like I don't know that player's gonna, but it works, and it's really about the variability through this sort of cohesive space and narrative space that you can engage, and I like that a lot. Here's what I don't like in particular, and like this comes with a little bit of a story, so bear with me. I was in tabletop indie showcase at at the PAX South, which is great, and the Siblings Trouble was in there. Had a great time, lots of fun. Awesome event. Part of that, I was also in Tabletop Deathmatch with the Siblings Trouble. And Siblings Trouble is a card-driven storytelling game. And Mike Selinker was one of the judges in that, and gave me a lot of amazing feedback on how to handle dramatic arc and how to invest a lot of story and fiction into the narrative play. There's some similarities here, minor, but I want to bring them up because I think it's relevant. One, because this world is so fresh and so unique, it's sort of very difficult to roleplay. It's, one of the things the Siblings Trouble did is it's just the Goonies being kids in the woods with everyday objects fighting fantastic things. Like, it's a narrative space you can wrap your head around. The character and character types in this are so different in a world that has so many inner narrative rules and expectations that you don't feel equipped to storytell in it. You can follow along, but I remember the comic, but I felt like their comic was like 4 pages on their, I didn't follow along. Maybe there's like comic book after comic book, but just reading the 4 days of strips from the series back 3 years ago on Penny Arcade, there's not enough there for me to feel like I know what I'm supposed to do as a character, and so I sort of feel like it would have been more stuff to throw in the box, but I wanted the graphic novel to be included in here, or each character have the comic. I don't know, but I found it very hard to storytell in this space because I didn't feel like I understood it. And it grows on you over time, and over time you start understanding it, but really it's sort of just, and this is a weird way to say it, but Pulp Fiction fantasy on its side. It's just cool and interesting and different, but that's very hard for not the creator of the game to latch into and express. So I found that disconnect difficult, and it inhibited my ability to roleplay, honestly. 2, and this one relates to the Siblings Trouble as well, this idea of these narrative cards where, hey, something happens in the game and then you get to actually act out in character and you're rewarded for really describe it, was a core component of the Siblings Trouble. But in the Siblings Trouble, every interaction, every time, you doing something, the story prompts were on every action card, all the ability cards, and the character cards, the abilities. So the whole game was laced with this, participate in storytelling, and you'll get this bonus. In this game, that moment is there, but it's only triggered in certain cases, not infrequently, but not every time. It's when you use your special abilities, and so, most of the time people don't do it, they forget, it isn't about telling, the game isn't revolving around the storytelling, it's revolving around the other mechanics, so it feels tacked on. And to me, I was super disappointed in that. It probably would have just been best not to have it, and then just have some other mechanics so that it didn't feel so stilted, and you could get the bonus, but in a way that mechanically was more interesting, and just lifted the overall dynamics of the play, something that was a building, growing sort of arc of play, as opposed to just this thing you did if you decided to tell a story in the moment. Or have laced it throughout. The judge character is so underserved. The narrative is so underserved because it really isn't a role-playing game, it's an adventure game, which it's advertised as, right? But this hinted at something more, and I would have loved to have played that game because I think it would have lifted the experience further. There was more opportunity for that. There was more opportunity to give me a voice in each of these sequences and give a player card with some information or just a little bit more, really amping up the judge to be much more. The judge is not a narrator, really. And it's part of the fiction that it's sort of that's this third party-ish, but it ends up wanting when it comes to narrative. But if you set that all aside and you're just I'm going to go on the Penny Arcade adventure, right? I'm just going to go on their narrative and not worry about it. tons and tons of content. So I think a lot of people will like this. I think that you got to just walk right past the component quality thing. You do, if you're not going to sign up for 10 games of this, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games, at least 3. If you're not going to sign up for 3 games to play through, like at least a little tree, maybe 4, I think you're going to say, like, I don't see what the big deal is here. But the more you see how they've leveraged the abilities, the creatures, the mechanics, the dynamic board layout, the more you will appreciate what it is they accomplished. So anyway, this is Thornwatch and the Dark of the Wood, though again, haven't cracked this one open yet. Hey everybody, Edo here, and thanks for watching Gaming with Edo. Reviews over here on this playlist, League and Insider videos over here on this one. Subscribe, share, all that good stuff. But most importantly, play some great games. Thanks.